So much of our yoga practice is trapped on this mat. That's what I was talking about yesterday when we were talking briefly about mats. Mats are a relatively new invention in yoga. And they've been super great, don't get me wrong, but we've become confined to the mat. And in the way that we teach led practice, like led yoga classes, with a bunch of, especially if you're in an urban center, especially when there's no COVID, you're packed in a room full of people, your practice has to stay in this space. So much of our movement is on the train tracks, right? So as teachers, we have to find ways to get off the sagittal track, right? We have to really make sure. So when you're sequencing, making sure there's opportunities for between two panes of glass, right? Frontal plane and pepper grinder, transverse plane. Because otherwise it's so easy to, without even noticing it, sequence a whole class that's entirely sagittal planes. One of the things to remember is why we move the way we do is because our eyes are in the front of our face. No one's like stacking shelves behind their back in their job at the grocery store. Like we do stuff in this direction because this is where our eyes are, but we want to find more variety in our movement. We want to find more novel movements. We want to find opportunities to get off the sagittal track because again, it's too easy to not. And then for our students, their other exercise and movement is like going for walks, going for runs, cycling, right? It's all happening here on the sagittal track. So, you know, how are you going to do that, right? In your own practice, like I said yesterday, sometimes take your mat away in a way that's still safe for your joints, obviously, but like take your mat away and see how your body wants to move, right? In your classes, make sure you're sequencing classes where people can get off the sagittal track. Play games, especially if you've got advancing students. Give them like transition invention assignments. How can you get to this pose using as many movements as possible? So I'm going to step out to the side. How can I do that using as many movements as possible? Get them off that sagittal track. One of the things that happened in post-colonial India, in movement forms like Ashtanga yoga and Iyengar yoga, is they were very militaristic. They had rows of people lined up, all moving and breathing and doing yoga at the same time. And that's great. There's a great rhythm to that. There's great discipline to that. But we don't want that to be the only way that we move because our bodies don't move in straight lines. And right? Build up ideas on how can you get off the sagittal track. There's nothing wrong with sagittal plane movement. We need it for our everyday life. Again, our eyeballs are here. We're not going to walk like this every day, but sometimes we should walk like that, right? Sometimes we should walk backwards. Sometimes we should walk in circles, right? And the same thing on our mat. So step one, get to know your planes. Do this exercise where you look at what's the primary plane for some of your movements. Understanding that lots of our yoga movements have multiple planes. How do we decide what's primary? What's the essence? What are the primary joint movements? Is this a movement of hip flexion? Is this a movement of spinal rotation? Step two, get creative. Invite more multiplanar movements into your practice. I think I put it in a Dropbox called Extra, a folder in your online study pack Dropbox, maybe called extras or short practices or something. There's a multiplanar sun salutation in there. There's a bunch of stuff in there for you to start exploring. I mean, a simple thing, you take something like crescent lunge or warrior one, you could add a side bend, you could add a twist, you could add another twist. You can take the same movements that you teach over and over, add some novel movement, get off that sagittal plane, right? So you don't have to be reinventing the wheel, but we do want to start getting a little bit creative with that. Questions about that or thoughts on that?